So we're doing exercise 5G, and in this video I'll be answering question 2a, which says for each of the following, find the inverse function and state its domain and range. And this is what we've been given, and as you can see is in our function notation, in which I have my domain and my codomain, and my function is going to be 6 minus 2x. Now this question is asking two things of us. First, we need to figure out what my inverse function is, and then we need to figure out what my domain and range is. And as you can see, I've broken it up into those steps. First, finding the inverse function, and then finding my domain and range. So let's begin by finding my inverse function, and as you can see here, I've actually written down the steps we need to follow. The first of which is letting y equal f of x. So instead of writing f of x equals 6 minus 2x, I'm going to write y equals 6 minus 2x. Let's give that a tick. We've done it. Next, switch x's with y's. So instead of a y, I'm going to put an x there. Instead of an x, I'm going to put a y there. Tick. We've done that. Next, I'm going to rearrange to make y the subject. So I'm going to minus 6 from both sides, and then divide by 2, negative 2 rather. Divide each side by negative 2. And now y is my subject. So tick. Next, I'm going to equate the new expression to the inverse function of x. But before I do that, and I think this might be where everyone is making mistakes with this question, it's the form. Right now, it's correct. We have the correct answer, but we don't tend to write it like this with the negative in the denominator. What we normally do is put this negative up in my numerator. But if we're going to do that, we need to realize that this negative is going to apply to both my x and my negative 6. So I'm going to have to put brackets around it, like this. Because this is going to tell me that this negative is affecting my x and my negative 6. If I was to therefore expand this out or distribute my negative, what I'm going to get is negative x plus 6 over 2 equals y. Now the last thing that we're going to do is, and this is again just us being pedantic, we don't like it when the negative is out the front, when I have negative x here. I much prefer that to be the second term. Again, this is correct. This is just us wanting it to be as pretty as possible. So it's going to be 6 minus x divided by 2 equals y. But just so you know, if you wrote it like this, it would still be correct. If you wrote it like this, it would still be correct. We just want it to be as pretty as possible. So now when it's here, now I can go to my next step, which is equate the new expression to the inverse function of f. So I'm going to go to the inverse function of f. The inverse function of x, sorry, I can't talk, is 6 minus x over 2. And that is going to be the first part of your answer. Let's now go to the second part of your answer, which is finding the domain and range. Now, the easiest way to find the domain and range of the inverse function is first by finding the domain and range of the function. So what is the domain of this, of my function? Well, they tell you it's R, it's all the real numbers. So I can come here and I can write all the real numbers. Now, what is the range of the function? What is the range of the function? Well, in order to answer that, you're going to have to know what this looks like. Now, many of us will be able to do this. We're going to know that my f of x, my function, is going to look like this. How did we know that? Well, this negative here tells me I have a negative gradient, so that's why it's going that way. And this 6 is telling me it's shifted up 6 in the positive y direction. So that's why, I originally drew it here, and then I just shifted it up. And we're not drawing it precisely. The question isn't asking us to draw it. We're just doing this in order to visualize it so we can figure out what my range will be. And it's quite clear that my range is going to be all real numbers. Now, why have we figured out the domain and range of my function? And that is because of this little rule here, that the domain of the inverse of the function is going to equal the range of the function, and the range of the inverse of the function is going to equal the domain of the function. So in other words, I'm going to take this and put it here. Let me try that again. Let me make that prettier. And I'm going to take this and put it here. Now let me get rid of these arrows because they're quite ugly. Perfect. So that is how you answer question 2a of exercise 5G. Hopefully this was helpful and you now understand everything. If you're having any trouble, come speak to me.